So my first book is They Never Learn by Layne Fargo, which has the best premise ever. It is this English professor named Scarlett, who I actually would want to be friends with, because assuming I didn't annoy her, she would never kill me.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachael.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
the podcast where we should all over our books.
And today we are talking about books that make you say, good for her.
Good for her.
Good for her.
And we have Allison Dickson joining us later, which we are super excited about. Friend of the pod, Allison. Yes. She's maybe our most frequent guest in addition to Becky.
3 times Allison's in the lead.
Okay. I think our first three-peat, yeah.
Yep. Okay. It's like on SNL when they brag about how many times they've hosted.
They got the 5 Timers Club.
Yeah.
We have to start that. We'll start a 5 Timers Club. We'll get them a gift.
Okay, perfect.
She'd be what, our Steve Martin, I think?
I think so. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Becky's our Justin Timberlake. But yeah, so that'll be a great conversation, I'm sure. But first, Kelly, what are you reading?
I actually am sort of reading another Good for Her book, I think. I'm reading Girls with Sharp Sticks by Suzanne Young.
Cool.
It is the first book in a trilogy. I have not read any of them yet. And the third one comes out on Tuesday. Nice. So it's these teenage girls, and they go to school at this weird boarding school type place where they're not allowed to eat sugar. Their diet is very carefully controlled. And as I have just learned, their classes are things like modesty and decorum, modern manners, social graces, etiquette, manners and poise, compliance, and just in case you think this is all complete nonsense, plant design and development. So really just all like, you are to be a decoration, everything around you is to be a decoration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, but I hope they burn it all down.
Is it's dystopian?
I believe so.
Okay.
I haven't gotten very far. I'm, I think, literally about to start chapter 4. So I don't know for sure what's going on, but I should have the whole story soon because I have the first 2 books and the third is out on Tuesday. So
sounds interesting and infuriating.
Yeah.
Okay, Rachael, what are you reading?
I have 3 books going right now.
Dang!
I'm reading The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. So she wrote a book I talked about before on the podcast, To the Bright Edge of the World. This was her first novel, and I'm already liking it even better. Not that I mean, I loved To the Bright Edge of the World, and I love this as well. They're just a little different in that, like, while they're both lyrical and beautifully written, this one, the story moves a lot faster, and it's just like you get sucked in. And it's about Jack and Mabel. They're a married couple, and after like 20 years of marriage where, you know, they tried to have children but couldn't, Mabel said, we need to pack up and leave our Pennsylvania farm and move to remote Alaska and build a homestead. And it's set in 1920, and they're about to face their first winter on the homestead. And the first time it snows, they kind of, you know, she's been dealing with, you know, a lot of, she's having a really hard time. And then the first time it snows, they get really like excited and giddy and have a snowball fight and build a snowman, snow girl type thing. And in the morning, the snow girl is gone, and they keep seeing this little girl running through the woods with a fox trailing her. It's a retelling of the fairy tale. And so far, it's just incredibly vivid and beautiful, and I love it. So that's one book I'm reading. And I have 2 audiobooks going because I was listening to one and then my library app wasn't working one day, so I started another on the Scribd. So I'm listening to The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys, which I'm loving it. And then Anna Kay by Jenny Lee, and I'm also loving that. Like these books, I'm reading so many good books right now. I'm so happy.
That's awesome.
I'll probably finish Anna Kay today because I don't have that much left of it.
Oh, that's great. Maybe I'll find that audiobook on my library.
It's good. I recommend.
Great. I actually DNF'd a book yesterday. I was very proud of myself. It's The Lost Apothecary, which was my book of the month pick this month. I will say, I think it's a good book. I think that a lot of people would really like this book. I really enjoyed the premise. I read like the first 60 pages. I could tell I was going to enjoy the plot. I just couldn't get past the writing style for me. It just didn't work for me, but I think there are probably, and I definitely know there are a lot of people that really enjoyed this book. So I would say if you like historical fiction and books about, artifacts and I don't know, good for her. I mean, it is a good for her book. It's about poisoning bad men. So, I mean, it's a great, premise, but I just couldn't get past the writing style. So I put that aside and I picked up Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly. Which is a Cinderella retelling. So I don't want to talk too much about it because we might talk about it on Tuesday. I know Kelly's read it. This is her copy.
I remember you.
Kelly, by the way, there's a card in here for you from someone who borrowed it before me.
Oh, that's
And I borrowed this book like 2 years ago, probably. So it's been sitting in my house for 2 years. So you probably have a very lovely note from a friend in here.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Goodness. Yeah. She also, Jennifer Donnelly, who wrote it, she has a new retelling out called Poisoned, which is of course Snow White.
Yeah.
I have not read it yet, but I loved Stepsister and I love Jennifer Donnelly in general. So
yeah,
I'm excited to talk to you about Stepsister.
I'm loving it so far.
In just a few days.
Yeah.
Okay, so our book news today comes with a poll. There's a group of authors, they're writing a novel together, like a collaboration called 14 Days, and it is set in Manhattan during the pandemic. So I'm guessing early pandemic days, but it is a novel, but set very much in modern time, in modern situations. The authors include, because this does affect how I feel about it, John Grisham, Celeste Ng, Emma Donoghue, and Margaret Atwood, and some other authors as well, but like really, really great authors, and John Grisham, and some other people. But I don't know, like, do you want to be reading books about this time in our lives during this time in our lives?
Yes,
I do.
And I know I do because, okay, so I haven't been reading a ton this weekend because I'm a little bit obsessed with the show Married at First Sight right now. And I've been going back and rewatching seasons, and I'm currently watching season 11, which aired in 2020. And it was filming when the pandemic started. So they're about halfway through the season, there's an episode, and there's this one couple who's like the best couple on the show. They're great. If they don't make it, then love does not exist. I swear to God. But they say that the husband, Woody, he's like, man, people are going crazy about this COVID thing, huh? And his wife, Amani, she said, yeah, I know. Hand sanitizer's on back order right now. And he's like, oh, they're saying it's just a strong flu. And it's this,
oh, Woody.
I know. And, obviously a lot of people were saying that at the beginning, right? Because we didn't know enough about it. So it's just like this time capsule when I'm watching, and I watch it and I was like, wow, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So I would be interested now that we're a year out, it would be good. And now that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, people are getting vaccinated. I am ready to see some art and more like documentation about the beginning of it, because I think like we're still so close to it that I remember it and I remember those feelings. And so it's interesting to re-experience it in different ways.
I agree with that. And I do trust Emma Donoghue and Celeste Ng and Margaret Atwood specifically. Like, I know they'll do a good job. I don't know, it's weird. But a lot of my shows, my Thursday night shows, have just come back, and A Million Little Things, I don't know if you watch, but our friend Philip watches, and I know we had an in-person book club at your house, Julia, where we're telling you about all the stuff that has happened on this show, and it sounds like the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, and then there's like a paternity secret, but it turns out that was a whole other thing and just a big red herring. I don't know. But I mention it because at the end of last season, one of the characters went off to London to study at Oxford for a bit. And she ends up, I'm telling you all this stuff, and it does get back, I promise. It's not like me just rambling for no reason. But she is a breast cancer survivor, so she comes back for a scan because she couldn't get in right away in the UK. And so she gets on a plane and she comes home, and she plans to be gone for like just a couple weeks. And then, like, as she lands, there's something on the news about like, oh, the first case was found in the US, and she thinks she's going back, and it's like, oh shit, she's in the US for a solid year. I hope you don't need any of the stuff you left behind.
Wow. Yeah.
And I don't know, because I do feel like if you have something set in this time, it feels irresponsible and kind of inappropriate not to discuss it, but I don't know.
What do you think, Rachael?
I am excited for the book. Not just because of the great authors, but I'm anxious to see, like you said, Julia, art that is inspired or set within the context of what's been happening. Reading books for me, not that books don't like upset me or anything when they're about something sad or tragic, but that doesn't usually like stop me from wanting to read them. So, I'm just curious what it's going to be like.
I also think it's more interesting when it's like the first 14 days, right? It's specifically about those first couple weeks, which were so heightened, I think, for everyone because it was new and we didn't know a lot yet. Yeah. It was scary, but we weren't quite aware of how tragic it would be at that point. So I think that I don't know that I would be as interested in if it was like November of the pandemic, like we've all been inside for months. It's winter. So like hundreds of thousands of deaths in the US at that point, so I don't know, like, I don't know how, but yeah, you never know. I guess it would depend on the premise, but yeah, for this book specifically, for sure, I am interested.
Yeah. And I do think my feelings would be different if it were a different group of authors.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I do feel like it could go one of two ways, of course, and the author is a big part of that, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
I also, before we move on, I think it's very interesting that it's a collaborative novel and not an anthology.
Yeah.
So I'm also very interested in learning how that will work. Yeah. And it was just announced. It's not one of those things where there's a date for it yet.
So are they each writing from a different character point of view?
I don't know.
Wow. So that's interesting too.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. All right.
All right. So our next segment is called Recent Acquisitions, where we talk about the books we have recently bought, borrowed, or been given. I haven't bought any books this week, but I did receive my new bookmark from Novel Menagerie's Etsy shop. Ooh. It's inspired by the Folklore album.
Aww.
So
love it.
It's very pretty. They're really good quality. We'll have to link her Etsy shop below because I mean, these bookmarks are really nice. She has all sorts of different kinds of bookmarks. So, yeah.
I was just gonna say, do you remember that parody music video that came out years ago that parodies the Jay-Z and Kanye song? And it's in
library.
It's like bitches in bookshops or something like that.
No.
Read so hard, libraries trying to find me. Well, there's
yes, that one.
There's this one line in the song where she's like, I have a bookmark you can borrow, and she's like, do you know how many bookmarks I own? And like throws the bookmarks.
Nice.
It's my favorite. We'll link it down below because I think everyone needs to revisit that, you know.
Awesome.
But yeah, I was gonna say you can never have too many bookmarks, and then I thought of that. You know how many bookmarks I own?
It's true. Kelly, what have you recently acquired?
Oh, well, okay, so I continue to be incredibly into cults. So I got After the Fire by Will Hill, which is YA fiction, and it sounds sort of like the aftermath of the Branch Davidian thing in Waco. So I'm interested in that. And there's a book called The Devil in Ohio by Daria Paladin. And I don't know much about that, but it sounds like there's this girl who escapes a cult, and the cult figures out where she is, and they're gonna try and get her back. And it's apparently very interesting and very scary. So super excited for that. I got the sequel to Jane Anonymous by Laurie Faria Stolars, which is called The Last Secret You'll Ever Keep. And I'm also excited for that, but yeah. So not my worst week.
No, that's pretty good.
But maybe not also a fiscally responsible week. But you know, whatever, it's fine. Who cares?
And Julia, how about you?
I didn't buy any books this week, I don't think, unless I did some in my sleep, which is possible. I wouldn't put it past me. But I did, some books came in the mail. So my British books haul that I placed from Blackwell's upon Claire Hanscom's recommendation from the Britlit podcast. So I have to take a picture of these and send it to her because they came in. So I got The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4, which I read years ago when I was in grad school because of my friend Corey, also Kelly's friend Corey, who I went to grad school with. She recommended it to me and she had all of them, I think. So I remember reading them and loving them, and I want to reread it and then pass it along to my nephew Gabe. Yeah. And then I got oh my God, What a Complete Ashling by Emma McClysick and Sarah Breen. And it's like, it sounds like a humorous novel by an Irish author, and it sounds very Marion Keyes-ish to me. So it says, that's Ashling, small town girl, big heart, no clue. So I'm excited to read that. And then I bought Claire's book, Unscripted, which I'm super excited about. And I think it's about an actor and a writer, and they meet and fall in love. And so that's cool. And then I also bought Olive by Emma Gannon. I have read the audiobook of this. I got it on NetGalley, and then I loved it so much I wanted a hard copy because I do think I would reread this, and I'd like to try reading the print version too. And I love the trim size. I love that I got it from England, imported. So yeah, it was exciting.
Good. It's a cute cover too.
I know, it is so cute. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have Allison Dickson, author and podcast friend, to talk about books that make you go, good for her. So stick around and we'll be right back.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
Okay, we are back, and we are joined by our friend Allison Dickson, who we were saying, Allison, before we started recording, you're like the Steve Martin of our podcast. You are the most frequent guest.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'll be that alumni, that 10-time alum of the
I hope
podcast.
so.
That's an honor. Yeah, when I was invited for this one, I was absolutely stoked, and it felt very relevant given the topic. So,
yes, well, you
and
are
what I've been working on.
right,
So,
and you're an author of domestic thrillers, and I want to hear about the book that you're currently working on. But yeah, so this today's episode is about Kelly. You named it good for her books. So explain to our audience what good for her books means.
Justify yourself.
yes.
So there's a meme with, I think she's the mom from Arrested Development, which I have not watched. But it's like a picture of her kind of staring with a glass of wine, and then it's like me watching Carrie destroy everyone at the prom, and then it's like good for her. And this has been planned for a while, this episode, but of course it ends up being the perfect week for it, because with everything going on right now, I am anyone who can just burn this all down, good for her.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely the temperature is right for it, for sure. But it does seem like every few months or so that seems to be the case, and so then it all kind of, every time something happens in the world that centers violence against women and minorities and what have you, it definitely just seems to recall all the previous things, and then it's just that rage, I guess, that need to, I don't know, take it out, some like what we often do in books and fiction. So there's a bit of that collective anger, I think, brewing, always at a simmer. So
yeah.
So yeah, great idea.
I agree. Yeah, and in these books, I think you're right, like there's a way of kind of processing that rage through literature that I think is really healthy, even if it maybe brings up more rage.
Right.
But also just sort of, the way I think about these books is women taking their power back in a way. And the other thing it brings up for me is so often we hear complaints about characters in books that's like, well, I just didn't think she was likable. Yeah. And that is kind of what, and I'm just like, well, why does she have to be likable? Like, what? Right.
And it often harkens to this idea that what is likable? What does that mean? Exactly. Like people seem to have very differing ideas about what women are supposed to be. And I definitely think this is always thrown at women. I hardly ever see somebody say this about male characters. If they are jerks, it's like part of the aura, and accepted. But if a woman, we're not allowed to be strong and sort of, I don't want to say emotionless, because that's not the correct term, but let's just say reserved. Okay. I think of Hillary Clinton. She's always the first one to come to mind because she most often got the robotic term thrown at her. But if she hadn't been that way, then she would have been hysterical. And, or you just look at any working, busy woman who maybe has a family. Oh, she's not maternal enough. And so we're supposed to be mothers, but we're not supposed to be too emotional, but you got to be somewhat emotional. And, there's no way to win.
Right.
So when they say this character is not likable, I really don't know what the heck they're talking about. And that's part of it. It highlights the expectations that are impossible to meet no matter where we are in anything.
Yeah, and an unlikable female character does not in any way diminish my enjoyment of her book, like whatever unlikable means, right? I mean, there are some of the books we're going to talk about, there are characters that I probably wouldn't want to be like best friends with.
True. Very true.
I want to read the story, and the story is interesting and good for her.
And that's the thing too, right? I mean, you're right. If it is a character, I think that, like you said, that you can't envision sitting down and having coffee with, or that you pal around with, or want to actually be friends and confide in. I mean, obviously, yeah. Especially some of these characters that we see that are, you know, vicious in some way, or let's just say amoral. They kill people. So if I, you know, if we're sitting around like we are in this circle and we say, one of us says, oh yeah, I killed a guy the other night, he was, you know, and would any of us be like, what? I mean, well, we all would be a little shocked, but in the world of these stories, we're watching this happen, we're like, yeah, good for her. But that's what fiction, that's the beauty of it, right? We can sort of remove that cloak of societal, you know, acceptance and acceptability and roots for the bad gal,
right,
in some way.
So is the book that you're working on now, would you characterize it as a good for her story?
Yeah. So it's called, right now it's called Spring Cleaning, and I'm fighting very hard to maintain that title.
Love it already.
Thank you. It's a group of 3 women who from varying walks of life. They met on an internet parenting group when they were pregnant, and they stayed friends over the years, and their kids are, you know, anywhere between 8 and 10. A couple of them had additional kids. And so they decided to, you know, after a few years, like, let's get together and for like a retreat sort of thing. And a gentleman ends up dead, a notorious gentleman that they happen to, you know, run into, who got off easy. I call it, he's kind of like my version of Brock Turner. And can't give too many details, but then, you know, the guy ends up dead. That's all I'm going to say. Fast forward, dead guy. And then they realize that was kind of fun. Let's do that again next year. And so then they get together again and again and again. And so, and it becomes a sort of a ritual for them. And they hone a method to find the right kind of guy and that fits all the parameters that they're looking for. And they do the deed and dispose and move on. So, but of course it all, you know, goes awry. That's where the story, it kind of picks up a little further after they've been doing this a few years. But yeah, it's definitely predicated on this idea of, you know, we have this normal family life, and then once a year we get together and we let all that go. And of course, there are repercussions to that sort of thing. Whereas that it plays with that sort of dichotomy of, like, you know, on the one hand, this is great fantasy, these sort of like revenge fantasies, you know, getting to, you know, take a Nazi out of the world, you know, for instance. But human beings are not really programmed to, naturally, I should say, to murder one another. And I think things do eventually have a cumulative effect. And each of them have their own varying struggles with that. So, but let's see what happens. My agent has it right now. And we're supposed to have a sit down here really soon and iron the rest of it out. Kelly's read it.
It's so good.
I can't wait.
Thank you. I hope it resembles somewhat of what Kelly read by the time it ends up in the world, but because it's in that stage of is this commercial enough? And of course, I do think this market is kind of small, only because I should say smaller than the general domestic thriller market, because of the fact that we sort of have women presented in this unlikable area, and it is believed that wider mainstream audiences probably don't want to see us that way. You know what I mean? So it's kind of weird.
Well, I'm excited about it. It sounds great.
Everybody I mentioned it to is excited about it, and that's what I'm telling them. Like, look, I talk about this book every chance I get, because it's very easy to say, yeah, moms get together every spring and kill someone. I mean, it's just, you know, and then they go about their lives and they're like, oh, whoa, I want to read that.
Yeah,
I do too, honestly. So I wrote it. So anyway, yeah, fingers crossed. I would
Nice.
love to get this one out in the world. It was a lot of fun, and it's a tight, fun little story. So
Cool.
yeah, yeah. But I wanted to show you something,
Yeah.
real quick. I don't know if you brought up Layne Fargo.
She's one of
And
mine.
Yeah, we
okay,
haven't done
all right.
we're gonna do our round robin, but yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, then I'm gonna shut up because once we get to her, I have
Okay.
to show you something.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, why don't we start then with Kelly? So we're going to do a round robin like we normally do for our what you should read recommendations. And Kelly, since you conceptualized this episode's topic, why don't you start us off?
I run this town. So my first book is They Never Learn by Layne Fargo, which has the best premise ever. It is this English
Great.
professor named Scarlett, who I actually would want to be friends with, because assuming I didn't annoy her, she would never kill me. But she every year finds the worst man on campus and kills him. And
Whoa.
she might make it look like a suicide. She might make it look like an accident. But she kills a Brock Turner-ish person, a professor who goes after students. It's like just, like bad people on campus. And nobody figures out that it's, a serial killer doing stuff. And then one death kind of goes a little bit awry, and somebody thinks like, well, maybe it wasn't a suicide, maybe it was deliberate. And then they look into everything on the campus and is kind of start piecing things together. It's so good, and I bought it based on the premise, but it turns out that it is blurbed by one Allison Dickson.
Yay. I love Layne Fargo. She is incredible. Her book Temper is one of my favorites. And so I sort of started fangirling after I read that. And then she sort of like was okay with that. And, we became friends, and we interact on Twitter. And I told her right before They Never Learn came out, I'm like, I don't think you'll ever, care to have me blurb this book, but I really want to blurb your next book. And so I got a copy, the publisher sent me a copy, and I got to do it. And then we did a book event together earlier this year, a virtual one, for a bookstore in Columbus, Ohio. And that was a lot of fun. And then she sent me a bit of swag, and it's "Kill Your Local Rapist," little sticker
With a knife.
like backwards on my camera. And so I put it on the thank you card that she sent me. And then I usually keep this on my bookshelf, like in a prominent place.
Nice.
But I was like, this sticker like exemplifies everything we're talking about today.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I had to bring that along to show that she is stunning as both a writer and a person. And when Kelly mentioned she picked that book, I was like, oh, amazing. That's honestly would have been my round robin pick for this topic.
That's awesome.
Awesome. I really want to read that.
It's so good. You really should. I don't know what Temper is though.
Oh, Temper is like, think Black Swan kind of thing. It's this Chicago theater company, and some very sordid drama that happens in this maniacal sort of the guy who runs it, who was also like the lead actor in it, and it's about the dynamic between him and these two women. And it is vicious and brutal and bitter and just I always compare it to Black Swan in a lot of ways, because it kind of deals with ambition and all the kind of backbiting that happens, and the destructive nature of that. So it's not quite in this category of what we're talking about here, but it definitely deals with aspects of like the toxic masculinity and and the things that drive that. And so it's her debut. It came out the same year that my book came out. I highly recommend it. I blazed through that book in a day. So
Nice.
I feel like you can't go wrong with her books.
Yeah. Well, Allison, do you have a pick for the round robin?
I mean, I go back and forth on this a lot because I haven't read honestly a ton in this category, and I think it's so I eventually settled on Samantha Downing. She is another one that kind of fits into this category of writing these strong kind of vicious female characters, and I went to My Lovely Wife, although her latest, I actually haven't read it yet, but it's on my list, and the title is completely escaping me at the moment. I will have that before the end, but oh God, yeah, I almost had it. But My Lovely Wife, this married character or this married couple that engage in a bit of a serial killing hobby themselves, and you can never quite tell whether Millicent, that's the wife, whether she is someone that you should be rooting for or someone that you should be terrified of, because it's largely told through the point of view of her husband. And he starts to suspect that she is sort of breaking their protocol that they've established and is doing things on her own that could put them both at risk. And she is and because they find like this other body that totally fits their MO, right? But it seemed like Millicent did that all on her own and was hiding it from him. It was almost like she's cheating on him with another murder. But, like, you had an affair on me, but you killed someone without me, kind of situation. Yeah. And so she's carrying out her own separate agenda, and it gets deeper and deeper into this mess of a marriage and how they met. And she is just this cool and very like statuesque, like mysterious person and mother, and everything's very orderly, and she is scary but at the same time like compelling. And so and then reading from the point of view of the husband, who's also a bit of an unreliable narrator in himself. So check out My Lovely Wife. I really loved it, and I will get the name of her latest book, but Samantha Downing is a stunning writer herself and a really nice lady. And I've, more people need to be reading this subset of authors, because I do feel like they write fantastic books, but they don't seem to quite crack the ceiling into mainstream, the places occupied by, say, like the Karen Slaughters and the Laura Hill,
right?
Yeah, those, that layer, even though they're writing fiction that's every bit as visceral and screwed up, in terms of the subject matter.
Is her new book For Your Own Good?
Yes. Thank you so much.
No problem. I just looked her up on Twitter. So
yeah, she's amazing, and I think she's got some deals inked well into the future. She'll be writing for a long time, I think, by the way things are going for her, and I'm thrilled because like I said, like Wendy Hurd is another great author also in that same camp. Like it's like just this sort of like mid-list authors that are writing some really great books that just need to be like out there more. So, and I'm happy to say that I know them, and I wish them all the best.
I'll have to check her out.
Yeah.
Great. Rachel, do you have a recommendation?
I do. My first recommendation is Perfect Match by Jodi Picoult. And this book is so good, and a lot happens in it. But the premise is the main character, she is I think she's like an assistant DA, and she has a little boy. I think he's somewhere around 4 or 6 years old. And one day, like, he stops talking, and they bring him to a child psychologist and find out that he's been molested. And so they're trying to figure out what happened, but he's not talking, so it takes them a little while to figure out who hurt him, and they find out it was a priest. So their parish's priest gets arrested, and during the arraignment, she walks into the courthouse, She doesn't have to go through the metal detectors because of her job. She sits down behind him in the courtroom and shoots him in the head.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And immediately starts acting crazy because she wants to put up an insanity defense, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say much else about what happens in the plot because, like I said, a lot happens in this book. It is so good. It is so engaging. Like, there are multiple perspectives, like most Jodi Picoult's books, and it just, oh my gosh, it is so intense.
I love Jodi. I haven't read a ton of hers, but what I have read, I've really enjoyed because it does put you into these kind of moral conundrums and scenarios that really make you question what where your own sympathies really lie and what you would do. And that sounds like a fantastic premise. Like I could completely put myself in that woman's shoes.
It's so good.
Honestly.
Like, I highly recommend. It's one of her best.
I second that. That was a good one. I remember
Is that a recent release or is that
no? It's a little older. I want to say early 2000s. Maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
She's got so many.
Yeah. Really, yeah. I always see a new one out from her. Anytime I go to the bookstore, I see her on a front table somewhere. So
yeah.
Okay, well, I have a recommendation. So if you're looking for a book to scare the incels and men's rights activists in your life, then you should read The Power by Naomi Alderman.
Yes.
So yes. So this book, I know some of you have read it. Allison, have you read this one?
I have not, but it's going on my list immediately, just on that basis alone.
I think you would love it. So it is kind of like if like a Gone Girl met World War Z. I don't even know. Like, so basically, like,
wow.
In this world, women and girls develop the power to electrocute with their touch, so they can electrocute men just like by zapping them. And the power is developed in their collarbone. They call it a skein. So this starts happening, and obviously, like, the world freaks the fuck out, right? Because all of a sudden, women have physical dominance over men for the first time, and so all of a sudden, women become political leaders. They take over the military. Girls are, seen as dangerous and need to be controlled, and this sort of thing. Like, I mean, that's not different, but like that's how it's seen. But like, then there's like politicians who are trying to like use it to their benefit. And so like things are just totally upended, and it follows different points of view too, which is really interesting. Like, it follows this tough talking girl from London, and then there's another girl who's raised by these religious fundamentalists, and she runs away and like kind of starts her own cult. And then there's this like politician in America, and she has daughters, and she's trying to like manipulate things to her benefit. It's really, really interesting. And I mean, I think like some people might say like, well, this would be terrible if one sex had complete control physically over another. And to that, I would say, no shit. That's what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
Right now,
the point.
we live in a world right now where a man can go and commit mass murder against women, and the police can say he was having a bad day. And
just at the end of his rope.
Oh, and you know what? We get to learn from the headlines that he went to church.
Right.
Like he was a church going guy.
Right.
He just happened to have a bad day and murder 8 women. Okay.
Yeah.
Why do people think that someone going to church is going to make me sympathetic to them? I don't know.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to when that's no longer considered the qualifying thing,
I mean, so like, I'm not saying that this book is like a utopian future that we should all strive for, and how great would that be, but I'm saying this is what we're dealing with now in the opposite direction, and this book is a mirror. So I think I really like that book.
I love the way that uses metaphor. That's a powerful, so to speak, given the title, metaphor. In so many ways. It also kind of gave me a little bit of X-Men vibes, just like this whole idea of somebody with this mutation, becoming more powerful than the people that don't. And there's so much that can be inferred about society through X-Men and the sort of tropes that uses. So I love this in a more feminist context. So I will definitely, I love all these recommendations. I am absolutely going to check that one out. That sounds like a great, I wasn't expecting that to take on a sci-fi bent. I was like, whoa, hold on. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I get
it's not,
yeah, I don't know.
definitely sci-fi. So it's not a domestic thriller, but it is sci-fi.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I love that. I love it. That was completely unexpected. So I'm excited. Yeah.
Great.
You'll probably like it. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Well, those are great
Awesome.
recommendations. I know we're running kind of short on time, but do we want to do a couple more, like one more each, or what do you guys want to do?
I have one more. I mean, I have a couple more, but one that I really want to talk about.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. The Lady Upstairs by Haley Sutton. And it is kind of good for her meets noir, which I am a big fan of. And it's this group, and what they do is they go after like politicians or other famous men in the town, and they lure them into like situations where there's, say, a compromising position or whatever, and then end up extorting money from them. And you know, it's not fully a good for her, but at the same time, like you can't hurt men who aren't doing bad things.
Yeah.
So, you know,
That's a very good point.
I do like a book where it's like people are going after only amoral people. You know, there was a series of books my mom used to talk about a lot, and I can't remember the title, but it was like they were vampires, but they would kill like discriminately, like only they would go after like the murderers and the rapists. And I can't remember what it was called, but she used to talk about it all the time. I'll have to ask her. But yeah, that's always like an interesting premise to me.
Yeah.
Kind of like your spring cleaning.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely like brings to mind, as I was like pondering a lot of movies that sort of deal in the sort of vigilante aspect of seeking justice, and it's really just it's a fruitful playground, and I love the way that so many people have played on this through either fantasy sci-fi devices or thriller or noir or all these things, because it really comes down to powerless people seeking to balance the equation, and or people that have been oppressed in some way or violated and hurt in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an eternal, I don't think that's ever really going to go away, no matter how fair we try to make things in our society. I think there's always going to be the oppressor oppressed dynamic, and the people that are going to, because there's always going to be someone on top of the pile,
right?
Yeah.
And and eventually people are going to feel the weight of that, and they're going to seek to shift the balance again. So
yeah, for sure.
Love it. Yeah.
Rachael, do you have another recommendation?
I have one. It's a bit of a wild card, but nobody murders anyone or anything. But it's called "Where'd You Go, Bernadette?" By Maria Semple. And the reason I picked this as a good for her book is Bernadette lives her life the way she wants to live it, despite or in spite of the man or men in her life wanting to mold her to fit a certain, idea that they have of her. So the book opens, she is a mother to a 13-year-old girl who's very smart, just like super nice kid, super good kid. She's gotten all A's and says, "You promised me we could go on a family trip anywhere we want if I get all A's. So I want to go to Antarctica." And her mother, Bernadette, 15 years ago was a very famous up-and-coming architect and was considered one of the greats. She built this house that got her a lot of notoriety, a lot of fame, and then in the middle of building another building, something happened that sort of derailed her. It never got finished, and she kind of, I mean, maybe the word is like spiraled, and decided to kind of leave the spotlight, she and her husband moved from LA to Seattle. He's a Microsoft software tech guy. And she just wanted to kind of like live quietly. She doesn't like being around people. I don't know if it's like agoraphobia or what, but she definitely keeps very like it to herself, and she can't stand all the like suburban granola moms in her neighborhood trying to like tell her how to, you know, how to take care of her lawn and all this stuff. And you know, she just finds like all the preppy private school people that her daughter, you know, goes to school with, she just finds it all very annoying. And this whole Antarctica trip thing sends her on this journey where she becomes very anxious about it, and she's trying to, you know, figure out how she can go on the trip without, you know, freaking out. She wants to do it for her daughter. She wants to have a good time. And a whole bunch of things happen that eventually lead to her husband like creating this intervention where he brings like a psychiatrist and some other people to the house and like basically accost her about her behavior and everything that's going on. And she's like, what is happening? What is going on? You know, she's like, so she ends up like, she's like, I need to go to the bathroom. And she ends up climbing out the window and running away to Antarctica by herself. And
wow.
It is so, okay. The book, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop listening. I was listening to the audiobook, and I definitely will reread it. It is so good. And just, you know, watching her kind of try and figure out like, you know, I want to be a good mom to my daughter, but I want to find myself again too. And I want to figure out, you know, how to be happy and how to live my life the way I want and all this stuff. And, you know, it's also about the daughter, you know, being like, Dad, you don't understand, Mom, and all this stuff. And oh, it's just such a beautiful story. And the movie adaptation stars Cate Blanchett, and it's amazing.
Yep.
I have not seen that. That sounds really good.
I think it's on Hulu. Yeah. If you have Hulu, you should be able to find it. But yeah,
it's a good adaptation too.
It really is a good adaptation. Yeah. So good. Excellent. I love that book so much.
Running away to Antarctica. That's
right. Sounds amazing.
That sounds awesome.
Well, my other recommendation is also not one where anyone gets murdered. I don't think so anyway. I can't. But it is a good example of like this idea of burning it all down, right? So, and that is Shrill by Lindy West. And I picked this one. It is her memoir. And I picked it. I mean, she talks a lot about the guy who trolls her online, and he's really, really stalking and harassing her, and she confronts him. So like good for her in that. But the real scene that I really say like good for her is, so she used to work at The Stranger, which is the online publication that Dan Savage edited, or still edits, I think. And he's like an advice columnist and has a podcast and all this stuff. So she like worked for him basically. And he just, I think he's changed a little bit. I think he's gotten a little bit better, but he used to make so many fat phobic remarks like in print and on his podcast. I mean, it was really bad. He would like shame people for being overweight, and she just got sick of it and wrote this article and posted it on The Stranger, like taking him down. And I just thought it was the perfect example of how the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Like
I remember that. I remembered when that happened.
It was in 2011. So it was like 10 years ago. And I mean, she eviscerated him. It was just a beauty. And like, I reread it earlier, just kind of prepping for this. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I read his response to her, and he had no response. It was so pitiful, his response. It was basically like, well, I was a fat kid and I lost weight. Right. That was literally his argument. And I was just like, you totally missed the point. So I do think like, though, that she did have an influence on him based on like what I've heard him say since then. So I think that's good. Like she did, but like in the meantime, she really like opened herself up to like people trolling her and like gained all this notoriety. But I mean, she's just a brilliant writer, I think, and so funny. And yeah, like I just recommend that book anyway, but I do think it fits kind of with this theme of burn it all to the ground, because she really put her job on the line. He was her, I mean, in his response, he's like, I'm not even Lindy's boss. She says that I am her boss, but I don't have the authority to fire her. I mean, I could probably get her fired. It's like, yeah, you run the whole, like, you're in charge there. Like, what are you talking about? You were in a position of power. Like, it was ridiculous.
Oh my God.
Anything to avoid that responsibility. And I love that. And that takes so much courage, because anytime that that women in general put themselves out there to have a strong opinion, they have to pretty much brace themselves for the inevitability that somebody's going to attack them for their weight or appearance in some other irrelevant way. And so, bringing to attention that screw you guy for constantly shaming people for their appearance, it's automatically saying, hello trolls, it is troll bait. And she put herself out there, and it is that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was very brave. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this was so much fun. Thank you, Allison, for joining us. Any final thoughts, or also let people know where we can find you on social media?
Right now, you will find me on Twitter at Ms. Allie D, MSALLIED.
You're a great follow. Definitely follow.
Thank you. Do that because I am currently banned for 7 days on Facebook.
No.
I keep getting thrown in Facebook jail because I tell my friends that I love very much that I will cut them for insulting my favorite bands. I mean, it's just like one of those banter things,
Yeah.
But Facebook thinks I'm literally inciting violence, and I'm not. But that, whatever. Exactly. Good for her. And so I'm in Facebook jail right now, but I probably won't be by the time people are listening to this. But you can find me there. But you can also find me on Instagram, Allison M. Dickson. And you can find, the other Mrs. Miller everywhere books are sold, and hopefully spring cleaning in your near future. But yeah, come hang out with me on Twitter. I am the outrage correspondent, I have been told for
sure. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that's our show. Don't forget that you can get your first month of Book of the Month for $9.99 with the promo code What You Should Read, all one word. And we should be getting the April picks very soon.
Yes, and be sure to follow us on social media at WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Goodreads, What You Should Read Podcasts, and give us a follow and give us a rating and a review.
What You Should Read.
Definitely.
Podcast
And
all
now you
about
know
the
what you should read.
Join
You're
3
welcome.
book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.